my soul wisdom, that inner guidance. But a lot of people have lost touch with that for probably very understandably, right? It's talked out of us by parents, by religion, by teachers. And so I think a lot of the people that I work with, they're reawakening that inner power. First of all, recognizing that they have it, and then learning to trust it. Because a lot of people are stuck in that over intellectualizing, and they find when they start trying to tap into their intuition, their inner guidance, they're doubting it, they're talking themselves out of it, they're second guessing, they think, oh, I just made that up, because the intellect is used to being in control, so it starts telling us stories. But really, if you can learn to relax that, then that's when the magic happens.
Welcome to the Consciousness of the Way. I am your humble servant and seafood Taoist Master San Qing. And the stars are aligning. It's another day in paradise. It's good to be me. And I have the pleasure of welcoming this incredible guest to the podcast, Melissa Kitto. Kitto. Oh, that was close. There you go. An intuitive spiritual coach who has been guiding people and nourishing their desire to find their true understanding of reality for quite some time. I'm so grateful to have you on the podcast, my dear friend. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me.
This is a culmination of all things foreign to America on the soil of America.
That's right.
I love that.
Here.
So let's start with you just giving the audience a little bit of a backstory, an abbreviated version, however you see fit, of how you got to this point.
Sure. Well, I'm from New Zealand originally. And when I was about 12 years old, my mother was really on an intense spiritual search at that time, right? And this was in the 90s, so there was no internet. So it was like she was reading every book on New Age things that she could get her hands on. And I remember there was a bookcase in our living room that was packed full of these kind of books. And I think at a certain point, she kind of grew tired of just reading about things and wanted to experience it. And so long story short, she came across an organization that's now called the Way Showers College. There was a person visiting from the US, teaching some classes, etc. So after about a year of her being involved in that, she said to me one day, hey, Melissa, do you want to learn about your angels and your intuition? And she had told me a few bits and pieces, but at that point, it still felt a little strange to me. I didn't really understand it very well. But I think I was curious enough to go along with it. So I had this session with a friend of hers. She came over to our house. And at that time, I was shown a technique on how to ask my angels a question and get an answer. And I didn't really even know if I believed in angels at that point, but I had an experience that really confirmed that truth to me. And I now would kind of describe it as a spiritual awakening. I certainly didn't use that word when I was 12. I just had this experience where I could see the table and chairs in front of me as just reality, but I also could see that there was this spiritual realm that was around me and was just as real as the physical room that I was in. And I had this kind of experience of living in two worlds at once, and the spiritual and the material, right? And so that experience kind of set me on a course, in my teenage years of really delving into these things. And at the time, I was kind of in the spiritual closet. I wasn't telling anybody I was doing all this stuff, but I really had a lot of, I went to groups and classes to develop my intuition. And so from, around my 20s, I really had this trust in my inner guidance. And that helped me to, make certain decisions, one of them being that I now live in the United States. But there were many more along the way where I didn't consciously know that that was my path, but I was just following this guidance, this intuition. And at a certain point in my mid-20s, I could see that I knew that connecting with my guides and my intuition helped me so much in my life. And I started to see that most people didn't understand it. They didn't know how to do it. They thought it was complicated. And so I really realized at that time that my mission is to help people to have these tools so that they can access their own inner guidance and trust it, right? So that you don't have to go to a psychic to tell you spiritual guidance. You have access to it yourself. So that's kind of the short
Wow.
version of the story.
Okay, amen to that, my friend. Amen to
Yeah.
that. That's so exciting. It's like a being realized of this mundane reality of human condition, and then that is misalignment. And I consider an alignment when you have the epiphany, you're bitten by the spiritual dragon, the supernatural, the paranormal. You hear grandma, you see a ghost, you have this intuitive state, you have a vivid dream, a lucid dream, an OBE, an MBE. However you get there, you realize this is not as it seems.
Yeah.
And then it creates inquiry and desire to be on that path of seeking your truth, which is the only truth you need to be concerned with. And the absolute truth in of itself is, again, your truth. Always don't be misguided when someone comes to you and says, hey, I have the absolute truth of what reality is. I always tell people to about face and run in the other direction. It's beliefs are deluded because they're not fortified by knowing. And that, to me, from your own admission, is the very path that you've led yourself down, and being able to repeat it through some type of like access to this higher source, this gateway. Maybe furthermore, I haven't heard you use these terms, but the spirit, a source, universe, God, Tao, Buddha, there's a frequential realization of that. What would you consider that as being your intuitive state? Just reflection, internal realization? Do you speak on it as a guiding voice, or it's just a knowing?
Okay, so from my understanding, right, the true nature of us is that we are a spirit. We are a soul with a body, not a body with a soul. And we're choosing to incarnate into this lifetime, into this physical body, to have certain growth experiences that just aren't the same out there in the universe. So I think as far as the term that I use, I would probably say universe or source, but to me, it doesn't matter, right? There's this many different terms for the idea that you are spirit. But we have two parts to our nature. So we have our feeling nature, which you can really kind of call your intuition. And then we have our intellectual nature. And so because planet Earth has become very intellectual, most people are relying more on that side of them, right? The brain, the intellect, the organizing, the analyzing, dissecting part of us. It's become overdeveloped. And underdeveloped is that feeling nature, which is really the real you. So when you pass on from this lifetime, you don't take your intellect with you, right? That stays with the brain and the physical body. And all you take with you is the sum total of all of the experiences that you've had in this lifetime, the wisdom, the growth, the learning, and sometimes, unfortunately, the blocks that we need to keep working through and healing. But I think I answered your question in a roundabout way. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, finding this innate power within you. Within Taoism, we call it accessing the Wu Ji, the primordial mother, which is the vesica, the center point. So from a perspective of a Taoist seeker, everything is contracting and expanding at the same time. We reveal reality as a bellows, and that mortality is real. And to find that, to separate yourself, which is the mundane reality that most people operate in, which is the human condition, you will fall subject to that limitation, which is you are this body, you are this mind. So this is where, through seeking, you acquire this access point, realizing that the Wu Ji is the primordial mother, perfection, we call perfection manifest, and accessing that through alchemizing the energetic potential of this electromagnetism that someone would perceive as the frequency of a 3D dimensional shift. I just refer to it as a frequency, and you attain that frequency through the alchemical process. so that you can unify, not polarize or separate from electric from magnetic, which is just basically the subject of a duality, right? So when you acquire that, you acquire Wu Wei, which is what we call effortless action, effortless effort. You are always the now moment. Your ability to be no place, person, or thing generates this serendipitous, synchronistic, I don't know, I'm very lucky. And all of a sudden, everything just falls into alignment because I'm holding this resonance. And I think that's so exciting for anyone who starts on that path. And then, of course, it's from the place of, no return, which is the ultimate, which is like a level of ascension. So we go from physical body, energetic body, spiritual body, sun body, earth body, moon body, oneness body, ultimate body, and then being all things, which is a very clear, realized, self-realized, like now moment. And that comes from the alchemized practices that we teach the seeker, because it becomes sort of transitory and delusional if you're just in your mind and there's no evidence of what is the true nature of reality. It becomes diluted. It becomes psychological. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I think that it's very easy to get caught in the right and wrong, good and bad of our society's rules and regulations and the way we think we have to be. And so, but underneath all of that is my soul wisdom, that inner guidance. But a lot of people have lost touch with that for probably very understandably, right? It's talked out of us by parents, by religion, by teachers. And so I think a lot of the people that I work with, they're reawakening that inner power. First of all, recognizing that they have it, and then learning to trust it. Because a lot of people are stuck in that over intellectualizing, and they find when they start trying to tap into their intuition, their inner guidance, they're doubting it. They're talking themselves out of it. They're second guessing. They think, oh, I just made that up, because the intellect is used to being in control. So it starts telling us stories. But really, if you can learn to relax that, then that's when the magic happens. And I think that's kind of, in your different definitions, but same idea is that we start to awaken and realize that, you can be in the right place at the right time, but it comes from trusting that instinct within. And earlier you asked me if it's an inner knowing, and there's actually 4 spiritual gifts. So there's inner knowing, inner voice, inner seeing, and inner feelings. And we have all 4 of these gifts, but we have kind of a different order that we'll use them in. So a person's first gift is their first impressions. So people kind of do it in different ways. My partner is more the inner knowing type. So I get that. He just goes with whatever, sensitivity and inner knowing is at that time. For me, I'm more of the visionary, the pictures. So when I'm, getting a download from my guides or just my own sensitivity, it's more of a picture. It's like this flash of inspiration. Oh, I see what I need to do now. But it's coming from the inner, right? It's not the outer gifts. And that was some of the experiences that I had when I was younger, where I saw beings around me. When my father passed away, I could feel him talking to me just as real as he was just still in the room with the physical body. So I think it's from experience that we learn to master ourselves, right? Talking about it is one thing, but actually having your own experiences that you can build upon and trust is where, things really start to be in that flow.
Amen to that, my friend. I love it because it's being a seeker is conceptual until otherwise noted. The only self-realization is the experiential moment of now. Yeah. And that comes with a visceral, kinesthetic, somatic response that you use this physical body as a tuning fork to validate that very knowing. I always tell people, if you're thinking you are not knowing, if you are feeling, you are all knowing. And that is the true nature of the guidance of the Gnostic path of what would people call it? Know thyself. And coming full circle to return to that is to remember who you are. And that comes frequentially, that you are in separation. So everything, I don't know whether you look at this experience as in any way you integrate. I haven't heard any terminology that would insinuate you're a physics-based type of intuitive, but they use this language as a form of describing. It's a new age language. Now, for me, I'm in the depths of pictographs and oracle bone reading that dates back to consciously tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of years within a Taoist path, and more formally, it's been transmuted into traditional and simplified Chinese that would come in the form of Mandarin or Cantonese. Furthermore, this language of science is something that people like to fall on because it gives them a way to describe what they're experiencing, which is so very important, that you have your own dialogue. Like, the highest level of ascension for a Taoist is direct source channeling, which would be, for me, my teacher that I acquired my direct source with, Lao Tzu, was over 30 years ago. And he's always been, I'm in communion with him on a second-by-second basis, and he gives me insight. That dialogue is returning me to the monologue that is the primordial mother. This is how we sort of oscillate through that. And self-realized validation is a repeatable moment where you can go, okay, I looked into this. I had I just call it sensory perception, but I teach people clairvoyance, mediumship, channeling, physical healing, manifestation, whatever it is. It all goes under the dusty old Taoist priest of alchemy. And it just so happens these are things that are very useful for a seeker to define what it is they're experiencing and to validate it as now. Or furthermore, you don't go back into just a psychotic episode that cannot be measured, because that's part of the human condition. You need to measure something. You need to acquire an outcome. If you start something, you must finish it. This is the cycle. When you return, you become whole. All this energy is now, there's no need for lack of. There's no desire. You are just now. And so that's the Wu Ji, the primordial mother for a Taoist. And then there's a point of no return where you are detached from the mundane. And when I say detached, you're no longer the rat in a wheel, the dog chasing the rabbit, or anything of that nature. You are able to be at one with the now moment. That means that your mind is now the tapestry of this reality. If you think it, it becomes realized. Manifestation, magic, healing. It is no longer a separation. You're not asking the universe to help me. You're not looking at a guide to give you insight. That is it right there as the primordial now moment. That chill that you're getting through your body is a very validation of that. And that's that oscillating dance that we have as we commune together and we have a same frequency. We validate that through the communion. And this is basically, there is no separation from a Taoist perspective. What are your thoughts on
that? I don't know what my thoughts on that are. It's kind of going a little bit over my head, I will say.
Right.
But one thing that did come to my mind is that making it practical is really important. Mm-hmm. So for a lot of the people that I work with, they're really in the stage of realizing that they are energy, right? You are energy, you are a soul. Right. And to be able to detach from the body and see that that is just an experience I'm having, but it's not the real me, right? Mm-hmm. Even the habits, the fears that we're experiencing are really things that we learned from the outer. And so it's like learning to make that distinction between what's the inner and the outer. So one way of saying that is emotions versus true feelings. So my true feelings just are. I don't have to put any effort into creating them, right? It's just noticing what I'm feeling and what I'm experiencing in any moment. And sometimes we're picking up energy from other people, from the environment, but that is just is. It's not right or wrong, good or bad. It just is. It's a feeling. versus my emotions are the ways I've been taught to feel. So that's come from shoulds or things my parents taught me, or just the way society is. And we fall into that without realizing. So like for me, it's like spirituality needs to be practical, because we are here in this physical body for a reason. And so most of my clients are really learning how to be spiritual. But every now and again, I actually come across people who've gone the other way, where they're so into the spiritual, they're almost wanting to, deny the material things. And all of that is just a means to an end, right? I like what you're saying about the detachment, realizing that the job that a person goes to every day is just a means to an end. The relationships I have are just a means to an end. They're not an end in themselves. So that helps me to not get so caught up in, all the things going on, and really just see everything as a learning and growing experience.
Yeah, I mean, it falls back on the feeling is the knowing, right? And that's where the experience is it trumps trumps what's going on. So you get into that point where we call the imperium the command of the 50 trillion cells that is this physical flesh that looks back at you in the mirror, and you identify as self. This need to be I am the universe is the very unraveling and distraction that most people get in when they're going on a spiritual path. To be at a point of no return, to be at one with the now moment, is you are no place, no person, no thing. That is the true realization. And then it comes in the form of this currency we call energy potential. Right, that's the part where you're talking about. It's like there is a material aspect. It's not to be diluted by that, because your attention intention from a Taoist perspective is cutting the cloth of perfection, which is this currency, and you're distorting things from a Buddhist perspective. You call it the dukkha, which is the distortion of different energy. You're creating it with your attention intention. It's being formed. That energy has a currency that has a vibration. That vibration has a frequency. The frequency, if met with resonance and you're able to hold it, oh, yes, it will be yours. Oh, yes, it will. This is more something that someone would constantly pander to the audience of a manifestation coach or something, of the new age version of what reality is, in the guidelines of, laws of attraction, these things that are bound in belief, which can be very problematic for most seekers. You start with a belief, yet you never realize it as a knowing, which furthermore returns us back to what you and I are agreeing with, which is that energy potential is realized through experience, and then you validate it. It must be validated. So, you maestro the 50 trillion cells. That's why the alchemical process from a Taoist is so exciting and is pursued by so many, because you create that imperium, you create the command of that, and you're able to move it consciously within this material. So if it comes in manifestation, magic, healing, that now moment will be recognized and realized not just in your mind as a distorted delusional state, but actually materialized. Then it becomes true. And that comes right back to what you're speaking of, which is cultivating experiences, making them valid, making them true. I may have possibly stumbled across a past life 30 years ago that gave me a little bit of I might have been spoiled a little bit, because that was the first thing I experienced. Was I never meditated. I literally walked into a room and stopped time and space within the first 30 seconds of experiencing that. Blew my mind. I went from that to channeling. And then from channeling, I witnessed a physical healing where I watched gangrenous flesh turn back to pink in color within 40 minutes. And I thought this person needed amputation. So through that was a massive mind blower. And of course, it invoked this, what someone would call the dark night of the soul. And so I spent 5 days of every thought, every feeling, every emotion taking place at once, with by the third day assuming that, killing myself would be a good way to resolve this problem. And of course, I moved through to the other side. By the 5th day, it was all realized. But this is turmoil that people struggle with on the path of their journey when the energetics are not regulated, in my opinion, because everything is energy. So when you talk about your helping people remember, or I'm not going to put words in your mouth, your intuitive training of understanding how these people come to this realization, what kind of method do you normally use that would help someone have their Sherlock Holmes moment? Elementary, my dear Watson.
Yeah. Well, I'm a certified spiritual consultant with the Way Showers College, and it gives people tools and techniques to be able to, first of all, access their inner guidance, but also do it in a way where you understand how energy works. And I do think there are, unfortunately, a lot of people who are out there teaching things that are kind of misunderstanding this, right? So one of the first tools that I teach people is called spiritual cleansing. I actually have a free video for that if people want it. It's at communicatewithangels.com/cleansing. And that just teaches you to raise your vibration, to come back to the real you, because we're like this radar system of energy going out all the time, picking things up from people, from the environment, from wherever else. And a lot of thoughts we're having aren't really ours. So it's learning how to just raise that vibration, which sounds very metaphysical, but really what that's about is just having a stronger energy and being more relaxed and centered within, right? So if I'm relaxed, I can access the intuition, the guidance that's within me. If I'm stressed, if I'm pressured, if I'm emotional, then it's much more difficult to get to that guidance. Right. And so one of the things I do as well is help people to connect with their personal team, whether you call them guides or angels, master souls, it doesn't matter. But we all have a team of helpers with us to help us unfold our life purpose. And I think because that was the first experience that I had on my journey, was being able to connect with my guides. I see it as a really important starting point for people, because if I'm getting in my own way, which let's face it, I still do, right? Sometimes I can cleanse and relax and tune into guidance because they're detached. They're not part of planet Earth energy. So they can see things that we can't see. They're not part of the material world. So they're not getting caught up in it. And they've kind of mastered their energy. And so by helping people to connect with their angels or their guides, it helps them to be able to see that bigger picture perspective, to make decisions. I just had an experience this morning where I had a client that I've been working with ongoing, and I hop on the Zoom to chat with her, and I could immediately feel that she was stressed. And she's in a situation where she has a teenage boy who is going through a lot of like physical and challenges. I won't get into the details because that's personal to her, but it was like immediate, like, okay, this is not the right timing for this, because she's been distracted. She's got, sick kid in one bedroom, another stress kid, another. I'm like, and immediately guidance says, no, it's not in her best interest to do this right now. And I told her that, and she kind of agreed, but also was really apologetic and, oh my gosh, you're so kind to do this. And I said, it's not about being kind. It's not about my personal inconvenience. It's like when I get that higher perspective, whether it's a yes or a no, I'm going to follow that, because it's so easy for us to get our own kind of, what would be the word, like fears and motivations and desires caught up, but there's a bigger picture perspective going on. And so I think that helps me to, and can help anyone if they learn how to, to not get caught up in situations that are just not in your best interest, and to stay on that path that's more aligned for you, right? So I do believe that we come in, we kind of prepare for this lifetime, and we have a purpose and a plan. Not that every detail is planned out, not by any means, but there's a certain niche that we have, a certain thing that we're going to be drawn to, that we're here to be involved in, right? So for me, I've always been interested in teaching and helping people, and all the things, when I was in my early years, I thought, I have no idea what I want to do for a career, but every single thing that I tried was sort of about teaching and helping people, So I was like, oh, after a while, okay, this is my niche in life. And then doing it in a spiritual way, for me, is just like the ultimate, because it's also fun and joyful, and I really feel fulfilled by it. But everybody has that, right? And so if people start living a life because they think they should, or I'm going to go to this job to pay the bills, or this is what my parents expected of me, they start to get out of alignment. And that's why we have so many mental health issues right now, because people don't know how to access their guidance to get into that alignment with that path. That's when things become in the flow and simple to me.
Yeah. Yes. So how, the spiritual path has changed so very much in my conscious awareness for 30 years being on this path, acquiring, more insight through my intuitive state, and then turning it into a very clear dialogue and a monologue with what people would consider source information, the Tao, channeling. Channeling is probably the highest level of ascension, because there is no more of it, not more any more powerful self-realization than the evidence yourself, as opposed to a third party giving you information to come to a said conclusion. You need to be able to validate and do it for yourself. I love the idea that you're sharing this messaging, because there's always a methodology behind these processes. And, if it starts with the simplicity of the conscious and unconscious mind, and then realizing that you can, have this imperium, this command of that as one. And that once you access what you would call consciousness, I call it spiritual consciousness, you have 100% access to all things, the now moment. And that sort of, translates itself into methods. I mean, if I was to lean on one of my dear friends, whether they're focusing on remote viewing or clear senses, or, something that would come in this form, that, well, what is that? What do you describe this source of divinity? I mean, we can bring it down to the simplicity of sort of like, okay, you're getting this said transmission, right? So people lean to pendulums, dowsing tools, cards, Ouija boards, whatever is taking that transmission within your physicality and transmuting it into self-realized evidence. Now, high levels of ascension for a Taoist seeker comes in the form of these clear senses. As you develop them, you can see and hear things that would potentially not be accessible to the average mundane, person. But the developed skills, as long as you have neurology, can be acquired by anybody. And so when you start to really focus on that, we call that more commonly, divine guidance, which you would call, your spirit, your guides, your team. And then, furthermore, if you diluted it down to someone who would just be looking at it through the lens of, potential hypnotherapy stroke psychology, we're just talking about what they call ideomotor response, which is this understanding that there's a transmission. You create a dialogue with your consciousness or your subconsciousness, you become aware of it. And this is a ideogram, this your own version of what information is and how you derive it through your own experience. You start to develop these skills. That chill that you're getting right now when I do this, that is evidence of the oscillating union that we're having right now, energy potential. And I love the way you share that, because without it, you become sort of lost. You're sort of, you don't have answers, and it need to be validated from the seeker. I believe, personally, as a teacher myself, it's important to have a method to the madness. And that cultivational practice should be realized by every seeker, however it is, whether it's through your path, my path. There's a million different ways up the mountain. I always remind people, when you dismiss someone else's belief system, you dismiss your own. This is the very deluded state that most people get in, which is what we call the flex, the spiritual flex. I'm virtuous, you are not. Well, I always remind people that when you act in virtue, you have none. And they're like, oh my goodness, what are you saying, Jifu? Well, it's always that way, right? That perception, the fact that you're so caught up in the emotion, which comes back to that ultimate realized now moment, is the very distraction of the humanness. And then you get, you want it to be simplified, which I love the way you're speaking on this, because it really has to be. But it becomes more self-realized when you are able to play with the substance, the energy potential. As you put it, someone would call what you just spoke on earlier with your client as some type of form of empathy, empathic skills or sensory perception that give you the information that gives you a conclusion. Oh, look, I can clearly sample where you're at. Let's resume this at another day. Right now, you need to gather yourself and maintain and fortify whatever energy you have, rather than drawing it from your field of basically, constitution, which is where people sample things. I always ask people, the first thing whenever a student comes to me is, how do you feel at the end of your day? And 99%, I'm a clairvoyant, I'm a light worker, I'm a energy person, Reiki, a grandmaster, Chinese medicine, blah, blah, blah. And it's always, I'm exhausted. Well, you're still working out the path of understanding this is also material. You must fortify that constitution. You must enrich it so that it can hold, as you put it, we're a soul in a body having this human experience, right? Mm-hmm. So if you don't fortify the physical, you can't maintain your experience for an extended period of time in this re-up, what some might call an incarnation. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, I find that when I'm really cleansed and working in my niche in life, then I'm not getting drained. And I always, of course, I get tired. Like, my body needs sleep, my body needs rest. And I do think it's really important that we, meet the body's needs. But one thing that gets missed out is that we also have spiritual needs. Mm-hmm. We know that we need to eat and sleep and drink water, but there's also spiritual needs that need to be met, right? One of them that people don't know a lot about is what I call regrouping. So it's taking the opportunity, maybe at the end of the day, to go, okay, what did I experience today? And what did I learn from it? What's the growth that I'm getting? And if there are any challenges that you're experiencing, okay, what am I feeling about this? What is the growth? And for me too, that's an opportunity to tune into my guides who might give me a perspective. And I think, for a lot of this for me is very humbling, because it's getting out of my own way and saying, okay, what is spirit directing me to? I feel like we have a 50-50 relationship with spirit. I'm certainly not the one that's going to just blindly follow. I have my own desires and goals as well. But there are times where I might ask my guides a question and I kind of get an answer that I didn't expect. And so I've really learned to trust in that there is a bigger picture perspective, right? So when I worked with my client today, yes, I could feel something myself, but then I was just also doing a quick check-in with guidance who were kind of having that bigger picture of the energy. And they were like, no, so I don't want to do something that's not in somebody's best interest, or not in my best interest. And I think that's why a lot of practitioners get drained or emotional, because they're not checking in with that bigger picture. Mm-hmm. Trying to think of an example. I'm going blank, but I know that I'll probably think of it soon, where people just have unclear motives. Maybe doing something when a person just simply isn't ready, and it's going to blow them away, right? So we all are on our own kind of timing. Another thing I think that's really important as we're delving into connecting with spirits is to be able to make the distinction between what's that higher source of wisdom and then what's a slightly lower source. So in our program, we talk about the 4 zones of consciousness. So the A zone is planet Earth energy. It's for souls who are incarnated into a physical body. And so A zone is all about action, achievement, advancement. It's about involvement. And then we have kind of souls who've passed on from planet Earth who have become confused, or they're holding on to some kind of emotion. And it can be well-intentioned. So maybe a person has passed on and they really miss their spouse. And so they just think they have to hang around and wait for them. But really, we're all on our own soul journey. So if I don't have a physical body anymore, I don't belong around planet Earth. So planet Earth has become more confused than it was ever intended to be. It's become more intellectual. So I didn't come up with this myself, but I've heard it channeled that planet Earth right now is 65% negative. And the light workers, our mission is to shift it to 75% positive. Because that way, souls who are coming in have a better chance of being able to stay positive and fulfill what they came to do. A lot of people are getting derailed right now, where they're just getting caught in pressure that's coming from the environment, not even really them, and they don't know how to get out of it. So because of that, souls can move into kind of these waiting zones, you might say. So B zone is 0 to 5 miles out from planet Earth. And it's an energy of things like bewildered, bully, belligerent, bitching, complaining, that kind of thing. And then C zone is 0 to 15 miles out from planet Earth. And this is an energy that's more intellectual, but more crafty, corrupt, competitive, conniving. And so there's many different levels. And sometimes some of these C zone energies have a lot of wisdom. They've had many incarnations. They probably have some good things to share, but they end up they're not ready to incarnate again, and they start channeling through people. And there's always this tone to it that just something doesn't feel quite right. That's my experience anyway, where maybe they're in the old days, like this started kind of in the 70s, it was really, really popular. People, their soul would say, oh, have a smoke, have a drink, because they miss those things on planet Earth. Or it's sort of maybe subtle, like telling somebody what to do, or you have to do this or else. So understanding that those high souls, they never impose on our free will. They never tell us what to do. They're just giving suggestions, and they won't impose on us, right? So if we go down the wrong path, not that I think there really is a wrong path, but if we go down a path that really isn't good for us, let's say, they're not going to interfere, right? So we're on our own journey, and that guidance is just there to back you up. So that was just kind of what sparked in me from what you were saying, is that there are, just these misunderstandings out there with some people, where we really have to understand how energy works and how different, vibrations of souls, what do we want to get involved in and what do we not? Because a lot of people are, especially on my YouTube channel, people I probably will never meet, right? But I get comments sometimes. People are quite fearful of connecting with guidance because they think that something negative is going to interfere. But when you're empowered with the tools to work with that and to keep your vibration clear, you'll be able to recognize that and just not get involved in it, and only get that higher source of wisdom.
Yeah. I mean, again, it's so subjective to the ultimate version of your truth. I mean, people have this preconceived notion of the Hollywood version of what, something as simplistic as an astral projection. Once you start to understand how to create vibratory results from that, you will determine what the outcome is from your own belief system turned knowing as to what that really means. because so many people are like, oh, well, it's this and the soul does that, and you've got a soul contract and there's an oversoul, and I'm sorry, but that's, of course, the version that has been generated from your belief system that may turn into a knowing if it's given to you. But understanding that that is one little slice of consciousness, and it can be determined by the individual's transmutation of that information. So it's all variable on what do you resonate with. So as a bellows, from a Taoist perspective, you're contracting and expanding at the same time. You're all things and nothing at the same time. Your desire as a seeker is to find that Vesika, that center point, which is what we call the Wu Ji, which is the primordial mother. Then the frequential evidence of that is the unity. And you will be able to create, as said, miracles, manifestations, healings, all this type of stuff, which is so what someone calls superhuman, which is super normal, yet you have to be aligned enough to be able to show that evidence to yourself. So then, people get all concerned that, well, when I did this, I saw nothing, I felt nothing, nothing happened. It's about aligning the energetic potential, as you understand that people need to understand how to work with the energy or cultivate with the energy. That the basic fundamentals are simple. Everything is energy. It has a vibration. That vibration has a frequency. That frequency, if met with a resonance, it becomes realized. That framework, in my method of teaching people, is something that someone can digest and go, okay, well, that makes sense to me. Now I need to learn and absorb how to cultivate that so it is realized is my truth as my absolute truth. And that's where people get all caught up in the semantics of the story of, 30 years ago, when someone would have a psychotic episode that would end up on my doorstep, one of the very fundamental rituals that I teach people or are trained in as a Taoist priest in 2 lineages of Taoism is exorcisms, which are very, very palpable and tangible if that's the perception of that person's reality. What do you mean, Jifu? Well, if fear is driving you to perceive your reality as such, you will create a resonance and frequency that will bring it to you. And that means that this is part of the electromagnetism we speak of. So now you're having the evidence of visiting entities that may present themselves as a low frequency. Within Taoism, there is no such thing as good or bad. It's yin or yang. It's this oscillating effect of these energy potentials that give you the said result, as opposed to someone that is just resonating with serendipitous, my glass is half full. Then that is exactly what you will be given from the universe. The universe does not have a moral compass. It only becomes that way when you start to construct it with all these belief systems that make you very limited. But there is no right or, in my opinion, as a Taoist, the path is always determined by your own resonance. And so you'll gravitate to it. Someone might define it as, well, what makes it so? What creates that desire, that magnetism? That's for you to decide. What is it that you've had evidence? I was in the room and I felt the energy and I didn't like it, so I walked out. What does that mean? Well, you were contracting. You felt evidence of potential anger, resentment, negativity. This is your validation through your filter that this is what's taking place. And then furthermore, you can then go, oh, well, I'm around this person. I feel enlightened. I feel expanded. Well, this is now we're starting to get somewhere. You've got a baseline of something that will give you evidence of what your experience is. Now, this can be false positives until otherwise noted, because you know what you know, you don't know what you don't know. So refining that, as you put it, discovering that and creating a very symbiotic, clear messaging between you and your divinity is furthermore how the delusion comes in, and then you become detached. You become this present moment. And so all that is subject, until otherwise noted, to your belief system, which will only become realized as a knowing when you experience it. And I love the way there's never a right or wrong. I mean, I've done hundreds of these podcasts with incredible beings like yourself, as you referenced it, light workers. They're invested in this ability to raise a frequency. truly part of the Taoist seeker is the servitude, the selflessness that comes with that realized moment. And so you are no longer thinking, you are just being. And that means that you could have many moments that you can reflect on within your human condition where you have been selfless. I helped this person, I did that, I gave someone a hug, I asked them how they're doing, I gave them $5, whatever. That is a resonance. And that is part of attuning to what we consider as this raising of this frequency of empathy within the human landscape, humanity. And this would then be reflected to a very similar message that you're getting, where you want to raise the positivity or the joy or the bliss or positive frequency to a 75%, 25% ratio from where it is. That would be, I would concur, as being a very similar message that I get from my own Taoist seeking and cultivating, that it seems sort of very universal, which is so exciting about indigenous practices, is you go, whoa, there's a correlation here. And it's so exciting that there's some, the frequency is high because it shows it to you. If you're stuck in your personality and you're in judgment and you're in misery and you're based in the idea that your mind is nothing more than fleeting thoughts, then of course you're going to be trapped in the mind prison, right? But it's those Sherlock moments of the crumbs of elementary, my dear Watson, where you align and you feel it. And that's all you need. I mean, it doesn't get any more complex, yet people have to validate it. And I think that's really the biggest part of a suggestion or an opportunity to realize that from a journey within 2024 is to find what you gravitate to, what is making you contract and expand. And the more sensitivity, the more sensory perception you have, you will find that realized that you can really like, oh, I didn't like that energy. I like that energy. Oh, that made me feel this way. I feel that way. And furthermore, move past just the simplistic human condition. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Yeah, I love how you're describing that, because I think at the end of the day, a lot of this is actually quite simple. And it's like you said, recognizing what energy feels aligned for me, what doesn't. I think a lot of people don't really even have the experience of sensing energy. And one of the things I do in the first consultation that I do with a one-on-one client is get your percentage of spiritual sensitivity. So it's showing your potential that you're using at this time from a spiritual perspective. And a lot of people have pretty high, but it's like as you continue to expand and trust and, kind of not raise your frequency, but develop that sensitivity, use it. You start to feel the nuances of energy of things, right? And it really takes getting out of our head and all the doubt that gets in the way to go with that. But as a person gets more experience with that and trusting it and making your decisions based on what's the energy telling me, rather than what I think I should do or what I've always done or my fears telling me, but you can detach yourself from that and go with the energy. That's when we have all the cliches of I'm in the right place at the right time, things flow. But it's true, right? This is kind of how we have to describe this flow that starts happening, where things start coming to me more easily and I meet the right people and the right clients and have more joy in life. But I think for a lot of people, that detaching from the ego, the intellect, is really hard because we've learned to rely on that to guide our life. And that's what we were taught to do for most people. And so I think, looking to the Eastern religions and practices and the indigenous practices is so important because, in our more westernized, perhaps Christian-based societies, it's the masculine intellectual energy ruled, right? And it still does for the most part. And this is my feminism coming out now too, but anything that's kind of in that more feeling, feminine energy in our society is kind of looked down upon as weak or silly or stupid. And, oh, I don't want to tell my friends I'm doing this crazy stuff. But that's just, that's really where our true power lies, right? And the more Eastern and indigenous cultures recognize that and they revered it. And, I agree with you that everybody's practice is so unique and different, and there's many paths. But trusting that the one that's right for you, but knowing my kind of perspective is that there's truth in all things, but no one thing has all the truth, and at the end of the day, it's about how do I trust what's right for me? So the funny thing for me too is that I teach people how to connect with their angels. And that's one of the first kind of, courses that I teach people. But as it evolves, it's really more about trusting yourself than trusting anything outside of you, including your guidance, even though they do have your best interests at heart. What happens too is that a person's guides will sort of start to slip back and step back as they don't need that guidance anymore, right? When we become more enlightened ourselves.
Yeah. I mean, it really comes back to, it's more than a feeling, pretty much. It really gets into that state of knowing, and you repeat it. You keep repeating it, and it becomes more realized. That's why the alchemy is so exciting for most seekers, because they can materialize a result, a repeatable one. It's transmuted, and then it validates. It's not a fleeting moment of psychosis where someone goes, "Well, you're a little off. You're thinking and seeing things that are diluted," and that's where the energy potential is so critical, in my opinion, for your validation, your self-realized validation. And so people just go over and over it. Furthermore, you bring a point up about what we call the primordial mother, which is from the void to the light becomes the seed of consciousness within the womb of the primordial mother that creates all things. Through that cycle of the highest point of 9 within a Taoist seeker's reality happens to be the cycle from conception to human life created within this material. What a coincidence. These are all things that start to be realized through your journey that can make it so to you. And, if you want to dilute it more down to something a little bit more neurologically based, genetically expressed as, the epigenetic model of understanding where, you are subject to your environment as the transmission of your environment seeps into the self-receptors of your skin, furthermore activating your pineal, pituitary, and thalamus, which is the 3 treasures of the Jade Emperor's Gate. We cultivate this alchemical processes, and we use the culture medium, the blood, to shuttle that into turning on and off gene expression. This is part of, the evident realization of DNA strand back in the 60s. And, this, what I call the Keebler gnome, some people know him as Bruce Lipton, how joyful his little beam of energy comes in to play with stem cells and share with this knowledge that there's so much more to the human being than just flesh and blood. Furthermore, more than just a proton, an atom. You are looking at something that is at a subatomic level, and that's where you gravitate. It comes in the form of words, numbers, letters, symbols. That evokes your guidance. That evokes your passion. That evokes your desire to gravitate to this, whatever it is. And it's deep within your core. And this gives you sort of like an idea of, okay, well, that makes a bit of sense. I don't like using science, but hey, that kind of makes sense. I can understand why I gravitate to a scripture, a poem, just some type of like spoken word has a meaning to me, a symbol. We decipher it as the yin and yang. This is the decipher to reality. By seeing that yin and yang, the evidence to all things is within that. That is whole. And it shows that polarizing electromagnetism and ultimately accessing the primordial mother, perfection, that frequential unity. What say you on that?
Yeah. What's coming to my mind is that there's balance in all things, right? So I think we kind of live in a universe and a planet where there's a balance of two sides a lot of times. So I've been talking about the intellect and the feeling. So my, organizing part versus the sensitivity. We could call it masculine and feminine energy, yin and yang. But finding that balance of things, right? So we're kind of in a stage right now where the planet has become overly in the masculine, the intellectual. But the idea is not to flip it to be too far the other way. It's really to find that balance of both. And that's both in the world, but also within ourselves, right? One of the things that we do in the Way Show is college. It's really, I feel like spirituality really is quite intangible and vast. But these are practices that help us to kind of understand and break things down into simple concepts. And a lot of the concepts that you've been saying, like I've never heard before, but I can feel that resonance and that it's ways of describing something that's vast and intangible, So one of the things that we do and I do for clients is we call it your spiritual thrust. And this is taking your unique vibration of energy and distilling it down into a sentence or a phrase that kind of encapsulates your uniqueness. It's not going to tell you what you should do for a career or those, material things, but it's like your uniqueness spiritually. And so it's the energy that emanates out from you. And a good analogy is that the sun and its rays. So the sun itself is my purpose. It's that driving force. It's the heat, the light that sustains it. But then the rays of the sun is like my spiritual thrust going out from me. And my energy kind of reaches out and has an impact on other people. And people are really attracted to us like a magnet because they need to learn from our spiritual thrust. So after all that explanation, so my thrust is balance and harmony guide me through. And so this is something that's really important for me. And I'm always aware of in my life is, do I have balance, right? Of business and social time, or my intellect and my feelings, or all of those things is like something that's really important to me. And I find that if people need to learn about that balance and harmony, then they're going to be attracted to my vibration, right? But we all have that. So.
Yeah. I mean, I would agree. It's sort of just subject to the duality, right? This is the electromagnetism. You ultimately, to acquire that sense of self that is unified. It is not polarizing. It's not electromagnetism. It is beyond that frequency, which is furthermore how you acquire miracles. Super normal things is resetting that frequency. It's not, as we would say within Buddhist tradition, dukkha, distortion. It becomes unified as that whole, and it's a different. Some scientists would call it the 0 point, the scalar wave. This is the super glue that creates what they call Albert Einstein's version of spooky action, the bilocation, non-location of all things being unified within the entanglement. This is how you realize the truth. And so when you do this stuff, it's like, holy moly, there's something to this. I just witnessed a physical healing. I witnessed a physical, mental, emotional, spiritual shift in somebody that is undeniable. They cannot explain it. They're like, I had this PTSD, it's gone. I had a swollen ankle, it's disappeared. I had migraines for 30 years and they've disappeared and have never returned. And I have evidence in that. It wasn't just an hour, it wasn't a day, it wasn't a week, it wasn't a month. It's been 6 months and I've never had a migraine since the encounter that I had with Melissa using that frequency. I like to just share with them the frequency that returns, have them return to remembering who they are. And then you align, the misalignment becomes aligned. And then perfection manifests from a Taoist perspective is revealed. It's a facet of the diamond realized as the now moment. And this is where you get super excited. That charge you got right now. It's like you say, it's like I've never heard these terms before, but it doesn't matter. I'm resonating with it. I feel it. I don't need to understand it. I know it. That charge you're getting right now, boom, boom, boom. This is the power of what we speak of. And of course, someone can, in retrospect, go back and listen to the dialogue and go, oh, I like that. That works with me. Or maybe I don't want this. But these sort of put together create a better understanding of what I need to know about my truth. What I need to know about my understanding, my absolute, will help using this construct. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that's the currency, right? The currency is the feeling. And that's why people are like, well, we need to get away from the physicality. The physicality, the neural network, the 50 trillion cells that you perceive as your humanist, and you tap into the 0.07 millivolts of electric potential is the exciting part, because now you can start maestroing it any way you want, which continues to validate what you're experiencing right now. It's not diluted, which comes back to a method that's so very, very, in my position of teaching, a rewarding realization when you discover that we all have this. There is no exception. So, when people go on the journey of, well, I don't know what energy is, I don't feel it, it takes me about 3 seconds to have a naysayer who spent 30 years going, I don't believe in energy. I'm Christian. I believe in Jesus. No one can harness the energy. And then all of a sudden they're feeling energy and they're freaking out because this is defying their belief system, because it is not a belief system. It is a knowing, this experience. And so you can form it and attempt to limit it, but the construct, everything that is created, this can of soda, a cup of coffee, a cell phone, all comes from the derived said energy potential. And so that is a universal thing that cannot be denied. And so that currency will come in different forms, and mastery, how you teach it, how I teach it, is for the seeker to gravitate to and go, this is what I like, this is what I don't like. That's the beautiful part of the electromagnetism that we're subject to. But ultimately, that unified primordial mother, as a Taoist would see it, is no separate. It's like you go to a place of no return where you are detached from everything, but you're also attached to everything. This is where we talk about the contracting and expanding. That means that the center point of the breath in and the breath out, which is what you're referring to, it's like intellect, intuitive, center point, third eye, an indigenous perception of where you get that access point. Furthermore, what we would call the vesica point. This is if you drew a diagram of yin and yang and the circles overlapped, and that center point is what we speak of. That's the juice, baby. Everyone has it. Everyone has the ability to access that primordial mother. And when you do, it's serendipitous. It's effortless, as we would put it. Wu Ji turns into the acknowledgement and realization of Wu Wei, which is effortless action, effortless effort. And when that generates, crazy things take place. The serendipitous, the instant healings, the instant realization, the energy potential. I mean, we just go on and on and on. It's just more self-realization, more and more and more. And furthermore, you step past the point of no return, which is that ability to access it at will or detach from it at will. It's just a now. And that's the mastery from what a Taoist would seek for the alchemical process, is to alchemize with that present moment so that you can harness that 0.07 millivolts of electric potential. And then it becomes in all forms. So at will, when someone comes to me for healing, and I'm like, oh, grandma's in a coma or dying on her deathbed, the doctor's giving her 24 hours. And I'm like, no. They're like, what? It's all good. Thank you for bringing it to my attention. I'm just going to bring the resonance. I greatly appreciate you. And then next minute, tomorrow, grandma wakes up out of a coma, completely sober as anybody's consciousness would be, and their vitals are regulated. And they go, what the? How? What the? How? What the? And then, you get to someone like a dear friend of mine, Tom Campbell, who's an ex-NASA physicist, an OBE granddaddy who's been, teaching these states of awareness for better part of 60 years. He's a young old age of 80 and as sprite as a young man could ever be. Yet, he expresses that through his own version of what he calls my big toe, my theory of reality, of everything. And so he uses everything as a hologram. He perceives it as that. He doesn't just perceive it as that. He comes with the receipts of zeros and ones and the formulas that would be publicly known as the answer to reality, which he considers it's a hologram, a virtual reality, and you are the main player. Everything else is an NPC, and you alter the outcome with your attention intention. Your probability changes. The second you put that in, and as you maestro that energy potential, it becomes more and more realized within that frequency the second you put your attention intention to it. But it must be mastered. You get a little bite of that dragon, and people chase it for a lifetime and they never find it again because they're not familiar with how to replicate, which is so important, which is what I believe you're really bringing people's attention to, is find that method of replicating it, find that method of knowing and validating the experience you're having and being able to share that frequency with others. And then you get off to the races. Then it's exciting. The potential of what is possible is you're abundant, timeless, endless, limitless, infinite. Anything is possible. I mean, personally, my journey, I've seen it. You want to give me a scenario, I've seen it. And that's just the potential of what it is. And that's part of embracing that center point, that really you're contracting, expanding at the same time. You're all things and nothing at the same time. That's the paradox that blows people's minds. And I go, okay, let's water it down. Is your glass half full or empty? What? That's it. That's the simplicity of that. And then if you ask for more, just like Oliver Twist, you want more, boy? Yes, sir. May I have more? Yes, you will receive more, because that's the mirroring effect of this construct, which is part of the polarizing electromagnetism. This is more self-evident for dualism. The idea of dualism is an idea until it is created as a knowing, and then you go past that threshold of what we call no return, where you can maestro it. And that's the mastery, in my opinion. That's why people gravitate to it, Taoist alchemy, in my opinion, because it's exciting, because you get a grasp. You get to sink your teeth into something that, as you have through your own admission mentioned, intangible. So people get deluded unless they find a teacher like yourself or myself. They become deluded. That I say intangible. Well, I'm confused, man. I'm just like, I need something to sink my teeth into, which is part of what the humanistic condition of a heteroaction, which would be more formative for a dialogue within a psychologist, hypnotherapist sort of definition of what reality is that heteroaction. What you start, you must finish, which becomes the circle, which becomes the center point. And from a human condition, you're compelled to do it. That's part of the electromagnetism. It's like I walk to a door and I open it, and I have to, I don't know what it is. I got to close that door behind me. That's that chill you're getting right now. It's like, if I put my hand out, this would be, in my opinion, a form of manipulation. And people are like, what do you mean? Well, I am persuading you and manipulating you to respond to my action. And to the person that has the ability to access your unconscious, that is one stage into a verifiable commandeering of your mind. And they're like, what? It only takes a minute, and you can access someone's unconscious from peripheral or direct said communication. And it comes from, as you put it, physical action to non-action, which in the Wu Wei process is, you understand that everything is mind, but it's only that way conceptually until otherwise noted. That's where you have to cultivate it. That's where people gravitate to this new age, sexy, hermetic principles and Thoth and Egyptian energy and Akashic records and halls of Amente, and you go on and on and on. The South Beach diet was a fad back in the 80s, and so was the Atkins diet back in the 70s. There's a cycle of human discovery of something greater than what is material. And I think that's the exciting part, is you can always have your Sherlock to your Watson. Elementary, my dear Watson. And you just have that epiphany. And you feel that visceral charge. And you're like, oh, yeah, I'm on center point. I'm where I need to be. And it's like the more and more you have incredible ambassadors like yourself that nurture that, instead of going, no, that's wrong. No. This is how it works. Oh, my goodness, we need to about face and run as quickly as possible when someone attempts to take their version of reality and force it upon you to break your will. This is part of the delusional state. It's a framework. Alchemy for Taoists is a framework that you use to find your own self-realized, know thyself, Gnostic moment. And so that doesn't mean that you have to commune with all the spirits and entities that I refer to within ritual. It's the alchemical process, which is self-realized from what is absolutely validated as energy potential. This is the very universal truth that most indigenous practices, most belief systems will gravitate to that point. They may attempt to suppress it because the human mind is curious, and if they want control and more a manipulated word like dominion over your attention, you will have someone telling you this is good, this is bad. You need to do this or you will forever be lost. And if you don't do this, then this will happen, which furthermore comes back to a lot of practices I demystify within Taoism, which is more, abstinence, suppression of sexual desires, things of that nature. This, again, is a commandeering and a suppression of your attention intention. And so it turns into, a deluded state where people become completely deluded because there's an energy potential that it keeps being built up with, and you're not expanding from that, because you could transmute anything. Once you get the handle of the energy, you can transmute anything. So when people go, oh, well, you need to be, absent of sexual desire or energy potential, I'm sorry, but the way I teach it, you'll find that you can cultivate that. The old expression, the honeymoon is over, is the very limitation of those words in of itself. You can realize your first moment, first time I ever saw your face. The second you see that moment where you were in lust, in love of whatever that frequency was, your companion, your lover, your sibling, your whoever, that can be replicated at will. That's the part of the energy. That can be your glass half full to the end of eternity. You are making choices, which furthermore comes back to Tom Campbell's model of what is consciousness, your ability to make choices. It's like, that's it. I mean, it really becomes simplistic. What are your thoughts on that?
That's a lot. I kind of got lost in that. But one of the things that I was thinking about is that the idea of consciousness is, to me, it's just that feeling of being one with all things. Mm-hmm. And, I like to keep things pretty simple. And it's like, how can I, follow through in how I feel and what I'm doing so that it feels in alignment. Right. And so that's kind of my take on that is we all have a personal path and a mission. And if I'm not feeling happy, then something is wrong. Right. So how can I evaluate what needs to shift?
I love that.
It's really operating from the inner to the outer, not the outer to the inner.
I love that. It's so simple. It's like, elementary, my dear Watson. Well, I'm not feeling happy. So what is the obstruction that is creating this false positive? Because it is not real. So that is where you get that transmission going, well, I'm not feeling happy. Okay, so let's work out where that energy potential is coming from
Yeah.
and repurpose it, recycle it, and bring it back into the center point. I love that. I love that because that's really the truth, in my opinion, from all the things
Yeah.
I'm.
And I was
So,
also thinking about I brought it up briefly before, is the spiritual needs, right?
mhm,
So we think that we look at, people are taught to look outside of themselves in their life. Like, what do I want? Do I want money? Do I want relationships? Do I want all these things? But it's actually every want or desire that we have has a spiritual need within it that's looking to be fulfilled. So
mhm,
if I'm not aware of those spiritual needs, it becomes shallow, right? It's like, of the people that just going after the next car, the next house, and they're never really feeling happy,
mhm,
because it's like, okay, why do I want that car? Oh, well, I want it because it brings me a feeling of freedom, so I can go where I want to go, or abundance, or whatever. Um, and so that helps a person to stay in alignment, right? And um, one of the things I teach in my course is like, what is it that you really, really want? Not what you think you want or what you should want, but what is it that you really want? Because that sincere desire is what gives us our direction, right? So we've talked a lot about being today, but I do think that as a soul, we have an innate desire to grow. And so we need that direction, that purpose. I'm
mhm,
not a big person on like setting goals. I do set some goals. I know what I want, but it's
mhm,
like not goals in a pressured way, but what am I moving toward? Because that then becomes that evolution. And so it's like wanting what I need and needing what I want, then I'm in harmony,
mhm.
right? People that are denying their needs, whether it be physical or spiritual, it's like they're trying to fill up a hole. You know, sometimes we have holes in our training where there was something that I needed when I was a child, in the first 7 years especially, that wasn't given to me. And
Mhm.
so a lot of the struggles that people have is not realizing that those needs weren't fulfilled. And there's like some kind of hole, something is missing. And that's when we start to have the bad habits like overeating or, whatever else, addictions, because there's something within me that needs to be fulfilled. So, really just that awareness of myself and having a relationship with myself, so I know what I'm about and what I'm here to do.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Self-harm, or the idea of that, again, is in a construct of the the limitations of emotions, right? It starts with that seed of fear. And
Mm,
so fear, and this is very much the construct of magic within Taoism and how it works within a karmic model. The power and potency of Taoist magic is completely predicated on your merging as human. So the more you're controlled by your emotions, the more effective and swift and alchemized the energy potential of any magic, talisman, incantation, spell, however you want to define it. It will instantly materialize itself on the individual that stays within that karmic model that there is good and bad. And
mm,
so this is, people get blown away by how quickly I'll cast magic for something as benign as requesting, a short list of something as silly as, I put in an order for a Cybertruck and they're telling me it's going to be 2 years. Can you help me? Sure. I mean, this is evidence of how quickly you affect this material with that ability. And all of a sudden, their 2 year wait turns into, someone called me the following week and I'm going to get my Cybertruck. This is this is a little bit more infantile in the process, but I'm not shy of sharing people how quickly you can cultivate this knowing. Now, this is what I'm speaking of. So when you speak on something as retrospective as or internalized as addiction, this would fall in the seed of human condition. And then furthermore, how does that persuade you? I've come across many seekers that are, I've come across 3 people in my lifetime that have the ability to levitate before my very eyes. Two were, in Indonesian gurus in the jungles of Indonesia, and the third one was one of my students. And people are like, well, how come one of your students is levitating and you're not levitating? Because it doesn't excite me. I can give you the formula of how to generate that within this material, but I don't care less to dip into, levitating 5 feet from the ground, or what excites me is physical healing, mental healing, spiritual healing. And that's why I keep getting more of the same. Every day I experience it. Every day I get to witness it. I'm like a little kid for the first time ever, opening a present at Christmas. Oh my goodness, it's so exciting, because this is what I continue to cultivate. This is the desire that you are able to generate within your seeking path, but it can only be fortified and realized through the method. And so you always fall short if the emotional content is dictating your outcome, which I love the way you're like, well, why am I feeling this way? This is the fastest way to dissolve this. This is my barometer. I always call this physical tuning fork the barometer of your reality. You can determine you're contracting and expanding that energy potential through the feeling, which will give you self-evidence. And so, you could look at it from a scientific model of neuroplasticity, that your hands and feet within Taoism in your head, these are all points of what we call Lao Gong points within our alchemical process. So there's more evidence of neural network within the hands, feet, and the face. So they're the first places that start to what we call gather the chi. We gather this alchemized processes that becomes more self-evident because there's no neural network that brings that attention to a parasympathetic response. So you're like, oh, wow, I never realized this was going on. And I'm in it. I'm playing with this soup. I've got this evidence right now that something's going on. And it's not the Hollywood version where people go, no, I mean, I like that. That's fun. But we don't have to do this. We can be self-realized now through me sharing a frequency with the individual. And then they're like, whoa, whoa. And, anyone watching this can experience this. Just feeling the pulpability of the energy right now, as I'm doing this, you can replicate it yourself at home, and you will feel said evidence of that energy potential. And people will be like, how is that possible? Because it's now. And I just operate in that frequency that I can, get down with the get down. I can show you what is possible now. I'm an 80s fanatic. So, have you ever heard of the Pepsi challenge? You know what that is? That's a piece of Americana history where in the 80s, that was the evidence. They would have 2 cans, 1 can of Coke, 1 can of Pepsi. They'd put cups over it, and they'd get the individual to drink one and say, which does taste better?
Oh, yeah, I have heard of that.
Challenge. And they're like, oh, my goodness, I love this. And it's like they pull it over here, Pepsi. I'll make a Pepsi challenge with anyone on this stuff. Show me what the potential is, because that's when you gather the attention of other seekers, is when they can be shown, instead of, like you said, just all this talky, no walky. It becomes, gives you a headache after a while. Everyone's, I am enlightened, I'm a spiritual teacher, I'm a blah, 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 whatever. I'm happy. And I come across a lot of people that are full of shit. And then I'm like, hey, listen, I don't want it to end here. And they're like, what are you talking about? I'm embarrassed. I can't do it. No, you have been holding on to the fake it till you make it. And guess what? This is your moment to make it. All I want to do is give you that frequency, give you a method to make whatever it is that you're entertaining in your mind become transferred as an actual experience. I'm not interested in calling fault or attacking your character or what you can and can't do. I'm here to give you the leg up. This is a defining moment of consciousness. There are no coincidences on my path. If I'm here to share. Sharing is caring, right? And so a lot of people get totally, they freak out. It's like, well, why would you? Because that's basically my purpose. That's a message, the directive that I'm given is to help people remember who they are. That's it. And that's it. Like, and that comes from servitude and selflessness. So I'm not interested in going, oh, you're full of shit. Oh, no, I want to share it with you. And right now you're holding on to an idea that's formed a belief system, yet you haven't alchemized it yet. Let's alchemize it together. Let's have you have that miracle, have that manifestation, create that magic, and make it real in this material. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it, like, we're kind of coming full circle, and I do have to leave in a minute, but it's, you know, experiencing it for yourself. That's one of the first techniques I have people do too, is just feel your energy. What does it feel like? You know, and I've never had a person yet that doesn't feel something. It's right here in our hands. So, you know, and I'm running little groups in my city now, because I was, you know, behind the computer screen for a long time during COVID. And it's like, there's nothing more powerful than being in a room with like-minded people and experiencing these things, knowing you're not the only one, you're not crazy, right? So we do things like seeing auras and just, you know, developing your intuitive gifts, knowing that everybody can do this. I actually had a person at the last one come up to me and say, so is actually, like, we all have psychic abilities? Like, it was a new idea to her, you know? And I said, yeah, that's the big lie out there, that only certain people are psychic, right? Is that we all have these abilities, and we maybe have strengths and different gifts, but at the end of the day, we're all spiritual beings. And I think it's really valuable to foster and develop that, because of what we're saying is that you can start manifesting, you know, the life that you desire. So
amen to that, my dear friend. Thank you so much for sharing and coming in, and I'm so grateful that you accepted my invitation. This was amazing. What a great contribution to the Conscious Collective. And furthermore, in closing, I'm going to put all your social media everywhere people can find you. I want my disciple students, 126s, subscribers to any social media, to come out and experience what Melissa is speaking about. Find her through her teachings, through her knowing from the social media sphere, the interweb. And furthermore, in closing, I'll ask you this last question. What is your definition of spiritual consciousness?
Gosh, I think it's that feeling of oneness, that evolution and growth, living in the now, and the experience of being one with all things.
Amen to that. That was beautiful. I've done hundreds of these podcasts and I've never got the same answer.
Isn't that interesting?
That's how it's supposed to be. That's it. Yeah. So in closing, I want to thank you, my dear friend, for us being reunited, and it feels so good. And furthermore, thank you again. I really appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
And I want to thank I want to thank the universe for bringing you into my life. I want to thank the audience for sharing their time with us today. And I am your humble servant and Sifu, Taoist Master San Qing. And I'll see you in the next one, guys.